guys so much for calling me. I'm going to start recording, so you're going to hear a little message that kind of sounds like I'm calling from prison.
Cool.
Oh, yeah, that's even better.
This call will be recorded. Okay, cool. Thank you guys. First of all, thank you all three for getting on the phone with me. I know you're very busy, and I just want to talk about the why and the how of the show. Like, tell me the origin story of who had the idea, how it evolved, and what the vision was.
Well, I guess it's two different stories because there's Kyle's involvement and then there's our involvement, and I'll start with us because I don't know how Kyle gets involved with anything. But we were approached by PRN, the Performance Racing Network, sometime last fall, and they asked us if we would be interested. They were looking at making some changes with some of their programming, and if we would be interested in doing some sort of syndicated show, and if we had any ideas. And honestly, it's been sort of a fever dream of mine to do a countdown show my whole life. I got my start in radio running Bob Kingsley's Countdown off of records and doing all that. So I used to listen to Casey Kasem back and forth from church with my parents growing up. So I've always, it's been in the back of my head. But my favorite countdown show that I've heard recently is one that's done on Sirius on the 80s on 8, where they'll pick...
When I first saw the concept, that's immediately what I thought of.
That's where I got the idea, and I thought, well, I don't want to do one that's 4 hours long, but is it possible to take this same concept, especially with the way, the country's gotten so nostalgic with the 90s and the early 2000s. I'm like, is there some way we could do that kind of thing in country? And the people at PRN looked at us like, oh, yeah, great. And, like we were crazy. We thought that would be the end of it. And then they came back a couple weeks later and said, what about if you did it with Kyle Petty? And this totally came out of left field. And I'm like, sure, why not? So Kyle, how did you get involved?
So I was unemployed and sitting at a coffee shop. No, I do a show for PRN. Well, I randomly do a show for PRN. Let's put it that way. Called Fast Talk. And it's Mondays, every Monday night, and it comes on. It's a recap of the Cup weekend, of the NASCAR weekend before. So and have just got to be good friends with Doug Rice and Jerry and everybody out there. And one day after it was over with, we were honestly having a cup of coffee, and they floated this idea because they knew that somewhere in the deep dark recesses of my past, I have harbored a dream of being a country music star. So so they said, hey, are you interested in this? And I said, when you get ready to do it, you call. And that's how I got involved. Honestly, it's a spinoff of something else I've been doing with PRN, and that's where it came from.
And then, so we've been here 20 years, and I'd only had one dealing, Debbie and I had, with Kyle, and it was way back in 2006. When he was trying to win the fan vote for the All-Star race and with his Victory Junction project. I've been the one and only contact with Kyle, and they scheduled sort of a first show demo date to record on December 15th. And I said, I don't want my first, experience with Kyle to be, okay, we're in a studio, let's record something. So Debbie and I said, well, let's go to dinner with him. And I fully expected us to walk in, and 45 minutes later, him go, this just isn't going to work. I think you two are idiots. And we would walk out. And we wound up, they basically kicked us out of the Mexican restaurant 2.5 hours later, and I knew it was going to be great.
Yeah, and just, I want to be transparent here. I didn't stay for Charlie and Debbie. I stayed for the chips and salsa. That's why I was there that long. So let's be honest. Let's be upfront here.
And are you in Charlotte?
Yes, we're all in Charlotte, and that's the cool part. I'm not, and I will say this back to the PRN thing. I drive 45 minutes or an hour out to do that show every Monday night when we do that show, or every Monday morning when we do that show, because you don't get the relationship. Like we have, this is so much fun to sit in the studio with Charlie and Debbie, just sit in the studio. I know nothing about it. They put a mic in front of me and I just spew. That's kind of the way it works. But it is, you build a relationship. And it's no fun, man, doing it. Listen, first, it's bad doing it over the phone sometimes when you're having to do this type of show. The second worst thing is doing Zoom. Zoom is the worst thing in the world. I just never enjoyed during the COVID years doing the Zoom stuff. So so this has been a lot of fun. I come to the studio every Thursday so far.
Well, and you know, that's one of the last things he said as we were leaving the restaurant that night, first having the little get together meet. He said, I only want to do this if it's fun.
Yeah.
And kind of left it like that. I'm like, okay, that's no pressure at all. We just have to make sure we have fun every week.
That's
yeah,
it.
Debbie looked at me with that look of, we've been married for 31 years, doing the show together for 30. We haven't had fun in the last 28. What are we going to do?
Perfect.
You know?
And what's the format of the show? Like a first-time listener is tuning in, what are they hearing?
Okay, for example, we're about to go in as we're talking. The second we hang up with you, we're going to go record show number 8, which will air in 2 or 3 weeks. And you will hear the top 20 songs according to Billboard magazine for the 4th week in March 2020, I think.
Yes. We just select a different year for that week, every week that we do the show, and pick according to the chart. We go and research that and find the top 20 songs. And then what we do is we just give information about the songs, maybe find some fun facts about what's going on during that time in history or pop culture. We interweave great stories. Kyle is just an amazing storyteller. So we find relatable things that'll fit in and make sense with the music that we're playing that week or the time in history, and just get his thoughts on it and get some great stories.
Yeah.
From him.
So it goes like this, and I'll real quick. So my daughter is married to a songwriter from Nashville, and they got married. They got married on our farm in North Carolina probably 12, 15 years ago, right along in there. And so we had a Chris Stapleton song. And I dropped some knowledge on them. I said, okay, so here's the deal. For my daughter and her husband, their wedding reception, Chris Stapleton played their wedding reception. This is before he was Chris Stapleton. Okay, this is before, you know what I mean? But it's so cool when you drop that on somebody now, because they think, yeah, that's freaking awesome right there, man.
Yeah.
Kyle Petty's got money.
They get married at the Coliseum, man. Must got married at the Coliseum. So that's kind of the way it works. Is I've been around. I don't know if you know it, but I did a lot of stuff in the last century. Not much this century, but in the last century. So I got stories for a little bit of everything, and it kind of blends in because I listen to country and always have, and just. That's where my music roots are and where I've come from.
And how are you guys choosing the years that you're going to cover?
Yeah, how do you do that?
I don't know.
I'd like to tell you there's a scientific method, but Debbie and I will look at each other and say, okay, what year did we just do? And then we will go, either in front of or behind that year. We'll just randomly look, and really what we do is we will go back, like let's say, and we've had a year where this happened. Not long ago, we were about to start researching and writing a show, and we looked at that particular week in that particular year, and honestly, God bless it, we've been in country music for 35 years. The top 20 wasn't any good.
It wasn't strong.
It wasn't strong. There weren't a lot of songs that have stood the test of time. And so it's very important to us because, this thing is going out to more than 180 affiliates, that we have as strong a music selection as we possibly can. Look, in any given week, right now, if I was to go through the top 20 songs right now this week, I could point out 8 of them that we won't be playing in 2 months. And but that's just the nature of music. So when we're looking at these charts, we want to make sure that even those songs that maybe didn't stand the test of time in terms of testing for gold, that they're kind of gee golly wow songs. Like you go, oh man, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because sometimes you're listening to 80s on 8, 90s on 9, and a song comes on and you're like, this is garbage. Like, what is this?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's Debbie's response.
I know. We've been struck by that. We have. And you kind of have to just deal with it because it was on the chart. You can't change what happened, but you kind of have to just sort of lean into it and find a way to make that one kind of dud, maybe, if you will, more entertaining, and somebody out there's going to go, oh yeah, I've forgotten about that song, but that's when I broke up with my boyfriend. I remember.
Yeah, and that's where the entertainment value of talking with Kyle comes into play.
Yeah.
You know, he's, you know, Kyle's father and grandfather were legends in NASCAR. Kyle has led the most interesting life. I want to come back and relive Kyle's life. Just all the people that he's come across. And I mean, for example, there's a segment that's airing on the show this weekend where we got started talking about his father on social media, Richard Petty, going through Secret Service security at the Daytona 500. Which led to a question of how many presidents has your father actually shook hands with? The answer goes all the way back to Nixon. So I'm like, okay, wait, let's do a count here. So there's Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan. At that point, Kyle interrupts and goes, oh my God, do I have the Ronald Reagan story for you? And he starts to recount a tale of his sister throwing up in the Rose Garden as they're waiting for Reagan to come out and talk to the family. That's just priceless. And these are the kind of things that come out in casual conversation with Kyle Petty each and every week. We go in there with an idea of what we're going to talk about. And once we all have it, Debbie and I walk out of there every week and go, I had no idea where we're going to get all that. And it's amazing each and every week.
Yeah, and listen, I'll say this. When I open my mouth, I never know what's going to come out. So I'm just following them. If they've got an idea of where they're going, I didn't know y'all had an idea. That's pretty good.
Well, and see, that's the good thing about it, though, is we love that you are just free and willing to do whatever. You're game for anything.
Yeah.
I don't think you've ever said no to any idea that's popped up, and so that's where all the magic happens.
Yeah, and it's just it's our full, you know, it goes back to what Kyle said at that initial meeting. He wants to have fun. It's our job to make this as fun as possible. And for me, what I've discovered so far working with Kyle is it's fun for me if I just let Kyle go. And there's been a couple of times that I know for me, and when we're recording this thing, we have cameras rolling, we have everything else going on. But I've forgotten at times that we're recording, and we just get to talking and these stories come out. And that's where it's really magic, when you can forget that you're recording something or you're doing a show, and then all of a sudden we go, whoo, we got that, and we hit stop on the record button, and we go, yeah, that's just great. It's magic.
And what about, so you guys are closing out on a month, right?
Yes.
We just finished our first month. The fifth show airs this weekend.
What are some of the specific learning moments you've encountered, especially Kyle? I know you already had a show, but it would still be a pretty big learning curve doing this type of show. So what are some things that you've learned?
So, you know, I think for me, just coming in here and getting more comfortable in the studio. See, we do a NASCAR show. It's not in a studio like this. These are nice, you know what I mean? But I think the biggest thing is that to watch as we go through it, how it all comes together. I think Charlie has a great vision. And together they understand where it starts. And listen, most of the weeks that, and I say most, I'm going to go back and say all the weeks that we choose, they've already lived them. They've already been through this. They know the artists. They've interviewed the artists. They've talked to the people. They know the writers. So for me, that's been the funnest part. A fun part for me and a learning part for me is to hear them. I hang on their stories. They say I tell stories. They've got stories for every artist that's come through, that they've played, that they've introduced, that they've done stuff to. So that has been the part for me. The funny thing is that I'm not a radio show. I'm not a host. I'm not. You know what I mean? I'm not. I don't do that on TV. I'm an analyst on TV when I do my TV stuff. So somebody else tees it up, and it's my job to try to connect to it somehow and to try to hit it. And that's what I do here. So it's not that different than what I'm blessed to do or fortunate enough to do in my other life.
Debbie, what have you learned?
What have I learned?
What have you learned?
No, this is probably one of the most enjoyable projects that we have done. I've been in radio 40 years. I don't know. I hate to say that number out loud, but this has been so different than anything else I've ever done. It doesn't feel like a typical radio segment or radio show, it's just been a joy because we have a great time. It's like friends hanging out for lunch and just talking for a couple of hours, you know?
Mm-hmm. And have you guys had any guests on the show, or do you plan on having guests?
That's something that could definitely come into play down the line. You know, when we started this show, I remember telling the people at PRN, look, I'm going to be disappointed if what this show sounds like in week 1, if it sounds the exact same way 3 months from now. Just like, you know, Debbie and I have been doing, you know, like I said, we've been married for 31 years and doing a show together for the last 30. The show that we do now is far different than the show that we did in 1995. You know, things evolve, the product evolves, interests and techniques evolve, and so I expect this show to evolve with that.
And what do you hope, like, what's the fan reaction been? Like, what do you hope listeners are taking away, and what is the response?
Kyle knows more than we do because Debbie and I are insulated. You know, we've made a career of yelling at each other in a closet with microphones, so we're kind of insulated.
Yeah, no, listen, I will say this. Obviously, you know, I'm in Daytona a couple of weeks ago. I was in Florida last week. I go to Texas this week. There's not a weekend that I've not been at the racetrack over the last 2 or 3 weeks that people don't come up and say something. There's not. My Twitter feed on Sunday afternoons goes crazy because people remember the songs. They remember that week. They've heard that story. They've never heard some other story that we tell. So you know, from the social media side, you know, from Instagram, from Facebook, from Twitter, the feedback that I get has been phenomenal. Listen, I hadn't got this much feedback on Twitter since I wrecked Dale Jr. somewhere, and that was all negative feedback. That was all negative. So it has been really good, and you know, I think what I try to do, and I think what Charlie and Debbie try to do, what we all do, is when this show comes on, it's like you're sitting in. We want you to think you're sitting in the next room, and you got 2 crazy uncles and your sane aunt is sitting in the other room, and they're talking about music and telling stories, and you just get to eavesdrop a little bit.
That's a great way.
And that's kind of the way it is, because we want to have fun, but we want the people that's listening to have fun. We want to be able to bring back a memory, or you know, and they say, golly, man, that's the craziest story I've ever heard, or I remember that song, whatever it may be. So that's kind of, I think that's where we're shooting for.
And if you guys have any specific videos or clips or anything that I could include, like embed into the story, that would be great, or photos.
They are, I tell you what, if you will go to our Instagram feed, definitely you can go to Country 103.7 FM.
Okay.
We upload 5 clips each week to promote the show, just 5 reels that can be anywhere from 70 seconds to 3 minutes long, that are fully produced. Like I said, we're running cameras while we're filming the whole thing, but they're all there.
Okay, cool. I will go check that out. And then I think when you guys announced, there was a story or a picture with all of you guys in it, but if you have any others, send them my way. But
Hello?
Sorry, are you there?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We thought you wrecked Dale Jr.
Yeah. Either that or some other prisoner wants to use the phone.